Uh, I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup for the week of February 10th. Holy smokes, we're almost halfway through February. Here we are. This week's lead story, Caucus co-chairs in Michigan introduced bills to allow hunter education in schools. That's a CSF top priority. We're going to bring Bob Matthews onto the program here in a moment. Rest of the headlines, CSF announces new Governor Sportsman's Caucus chair. We kind of went over that last week, but we'll give you the follow-up there. There's an attempt to ban lead hunting ammunition in Maryland. Not positive news. Georgia Legislative Sportsman's Caucus adds 2 new Senate co-chairs. CSF-supported Disaster Reforestation Act reintroduced. And finally, Hawaii. Hawaii Legislative Outdoor Heritage Caucus celebrates sportsman heritage. All those stories and more, but let's welcome in Bob Matthews. Bob, we got some good news coming out of Michigan. Talk to us about hunter ed in the schools.
Thank you, Fred. Happy to join you here and happy to talk about a positive piece of legislation that was introduced here in Michigan and even one introduced in Illinois as well.
Awesome.
So this effort in Michigan would allow for schools to offer hunter education and give a credit towards graduation in school. So, I mean, that's a fantastic opportunity for folks that may not have grown up in a household where hunting and fishing is being passed on to them from their family. So they're going to school and they have an opportunity to learn it there. Then that's a great way to expand the base of hunters in the states that I listed, Michigan and Illinois. It was an effort that unfortunately saw an abrupt end last session in Michigan. It's passed almost unanimously out of the Senate, but then, as you well know, we work on policy, but are sometimes subject to politics.
Sure.
And there was a whole slew of bills, like maybe close to 60 bills in Michigan that died right there at the end in the House.
Mhm.
So this was one of them, but it had tons of support, bipartisan support. I think there were a total of 70 co-sponsors on each side of the aisle for the House and Senate version of
Awesome.
this Hunter Ed in Schools bill last year, and we expect that there will be similar support for it here in 2025.
Yeah, and to your point, that reintroduction of Senate Bill 58, that passed the Senate 32-1. So there's just one person out there just didn't get it, but like he said, almost unanimous. It was there. So hopefully, it gets the ball moving here and pick up speed here, especially getting clear of that 2024 presidential election cycle that tends to influence so many other things. Now, and I say we, CSF, when we're working with our legislative sportsmen's caucuses and we're proactively introducing legislation like this, a top priority for us, we often offer different looks at something like hunter ed in the school. So, maybe it's not in school curriculum, maybe it's an after school program, but still, satisfies what we're trying to do, satisfies some requirements there. What does this look like in Michigan? Is it a collaboration of different things, or is this like a class someone can take as an elective in high school?
Yep. So it was the language allows doesn't allow, it requires the Department of Natural Resources to work in collaboration with the Department of Education to devise a curricula that school districts can adopt as an elective. And that will count towards the classroom portion of hunter safety in Michigan. So they some states are going to be more friendly to firearms, right? And you'd be allowed to have firearms brought into the school, and that would be no problem. You could get the whole thing done and learn with hands-on learning with those firearms in the classroom. Other states that's not necessarily going to work because it may not be as pro-gun of a state. Michigan and Illinois are not states that I would classify as particularly pro-gun. So this is looking like no firearms brought in onto the school property. So Michigan requires a field day as part of receiving your hunting license. So you would have to go and do that separately. But this would count towards the classroom portion of that hunter safety requirement. So we know that it has the support of the two agencies, being the Department of Natural Resources as well as the Department of Education. This was hashed out behind the scenes and agreed upon by those agencies. And once we get it through the legislative process, then they will be able just to apply that course that's already being taught by the DNR. They'll be able to mold that into a classroom setting and offer a credit. Now, things are a little bit different in the Illinois version. It is not necessarily bringing in the agencies. It is simply allowing for school districts to offer hunter education as part of or for it, within the school. So it's not quite as explicit as the Michigan version. However, a lot of times part of getting legislation done is getting it introduced. It might not happen this session, but it is likely to gain more momentum if it's already been introduced, so that later on down in a different session, it's something that legislators have already talked about. They've already discussed. It's already gone through a little bit of the revision process, so that when it gets further down the line, there will be a better likelihood of getting it passed. So hopefully, we'll be able to work with the legislators to maybe get this bill a little bit more narrowed in, and allow for it to bring in the Department of Natural Resources to determine what that firearm safety and hunter education component will be in Illinois. But right now, it's just great to see that it is introduced at all, and we will work with the caucus, which is very strong there in Illinois, to make sure that that legislation is the best that it can be.
Well, that's awesome. And with, having those multiple agencies support it, the bipartisan support resounding from last session and coming in, uh, this should get done. I'm very curious to see what the reaction of the kids is going to be as a father of a young lady who's going into her freshman year of high school, picking her classes. I'm reminded of what that looks like. I've forgotten that process, and electives are in demand, some of them. So I'm wondering, when that it becomes offered, once, assuming this gets all over the finish line, how many kids are going to be pining to sign up for that and making that part of their academic year and their semester. So it's great stuff, Bob, and I look forward to bringing you back on, and hopefully we got some good news. Wrapping it up, it's good stuff. We're excited about this being introduced, and hopefully getting over the finish line with your hard work, and look forward to having you back on with some good news. Bob, we're gonna leave it there. We'll see you on the other side, my friend. Take care. All right. My thanks again to Bob. Sorry, Bob, for the Wi-Fi issues there. That's what happens when you travel. You're out there doing hard work, good work, and traveling everywhere, visiting. Sometimes the hotel bandwidth just isn't good enough, but nevertheless, we move on here. Let's get to the rest of those headlines. Just a quick recap about our announcement of Governor Gianforte becoming the new chair of the Governor's Sportsmen's Caucus. Just a quick blurb here. More of what we talked about last week. As a longtime sportsman, Governor Gianforte has proven to be a staunch supporter of the sporting conservation community, even joining our Sportsmen's Caucus in his first month of becoming governor of Montana. As a member of the GSC, Governor Gianforte was the keynote speaker at the 19th annual NASC Sportsmen's Legislature Summit in Bozeman, Montana, a couple of years back. He has issued proclamations for National Hunting and Fishing Day, recognizing Montana's vast population of hunters and anglers and their contributions to conservation, the economy, and Montana's cultural fabric. Before becoming governor, Governor Gianforte also served as the U.S. representative for Montana's at-large congressional district from 2017 to 2020. During his time in Congress, Governor Gianforte was a member of the CSC rather, and supported several key pieces of public land access legislation, including the Great American Outdoors Act. You can hear more from the governor. You go back a couple features ago and check in with our coverage from Shot Show, where we sat down with the governor and talked about all these fine accomplishments and his goals and aspirations as the chair of the GSC. So we thank him for his leadership and his time. And again, you can go back and check that episode out. Let's head to Maryland. I got some bad ideas going on. Let's cover this. This coming from Kaylee Leaguer. So the why it matters here, Maryland House Bill 741 and Senate Bill 634 contain a provision that will require the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to create a lead hunting ammunition phase-out plan on or before July 1st, 2029. CSF encourages the legislator and the Department of Natural Resources to work together to implement incentive-based programs for the use of non-lead hunting ammunition by hunters, provided there exists demonstrable scientific evidence that such an effort is needed to address population level impacts of lead exposure in specific wildlife species. Let's see here. House Bill 741 has a hearing scheduled in the House Environment and Transportation Committee on February 19th. That's next week. Senate Bill 634 has a hearing in the Senate Education, Energy, and Environmental Committee on March 4th. CSF will be testifying in person, in addition to submitting written testimony in opposition of the unnecessary legislation in Maryland. Here's some facts and figures for you. Hunters are the boots on the ground conservationists that continue to provide the most efficient, cost effective method in managing wildlife populations. In addition, Maryland sportsmen and women are the primary funders of the DNR. As of 2024, there were over 113,000, almost 113,500 paid hunting license holders in Maryland that generated 6.4 million, excuse me, in hunting license sales and another 9.2 in U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wildlife restoration dollars, totaling more than 15.5 million for wildlife conservation. The long-term effects of statutory ban on lead hunting ammunition may prove to be negative and have a negative impact on conservation funding, which is directly funded and supported by sportsmen and women. As an alternative, there are many examples of proven successful voluntary and incentive-based programs run by other states to encourage hunters to switch to lead alternatives that avoid these unintended and unforeseeable consequences. CSF strongly suggests that Maryland establish a similar program that could be managed by the DNR, which would allow them to meet their management objectives without compromising their funding stream. Eventual ban of lead and lead hunting ammunition through this legislation will ultimately eliminate sufficient opportunity for hunters to take game, as they will not be able to hunt if they cannot readily access or afford non-lead ammo. The proposed lead ammunition will ultimately result in legislature creating a new barrier for hunters and to keep wildlife populations such as white-tailed deer within acceptable biological and social carrying capacities. Further, the loss of hunters in the field will likely have a profound impact on conservation funding in the state, both from loss of license revenue as well as from the state's subsequent reduced capacity to access federal match dollars via the Wildlife Restoration Program. CSF will continue to work with the Maryland Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus to encourage the legislature and the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to work together to implement incentive-based programs for the use of non-lead hunting ammunition, provided there exists, like she said, a demonstrable scientific evidence that such an effort is needed in the first place. We invite you to go and check. Kaylee has linked here to our issue brief on it, but ultimately, there isn't a lot of good, strong scientific support for the claims that are levied and put against lead and lead ammunition. It's become one of these topics that is just it's more hyperbolic than there is truth behind it. a lot of assumptions and theories, but ultimately none of it's really borne out any scientific data to support it. Certainly in certain species in niche areas of the country, when you think of species like condors out west, maybe some golden and bald eagles that have tested. If there are population densities of species that are loons come to mind here in the Northeast that are potentially at risk for this, maybe they're more prescriptive and more of a surgical approach to lead phase outs or decreasing the amount of lead in hunting and angling that is perhaps used where these are the levels, biological levels are testing above what's acceptable, right? It's not occurring all over the country. So again, I think there's probably more localized options instead of just completely banning the stuff outright. Now, the article does say it would create a barrier, and definitely so because if you look at turkey hunting, for example, there are alternatives. You could think there's a lot of new business stuff out in the market for the last, I don't know, probably almost 10 years now, maybe less, a little less. TSS has really, taken the turkey world by storm, and it is doing so in the waterfowling world. You got to be a hell of a shooting those. But to my point in the laughter, there is stuff's expensive. It's not cheap. So I mean, there are alternatives, but for example, if I'm shooting certain TSS loads at turkeys, every time I pull the trigger, it's between $10 and $15 a shot. Um, as opposed to some nice Remington uh number fours, the old green hulls there. That's probably $10 for a box of 10. It's quite the price difference. So anyway, as most of these things, let's do our due diligence and make sure before we do these broad sweeping bans on anything that we're getting it right, and there aren't more, like I said, more localized prescriptive opportunities for mitigation and working together to solve a localized problem that truly is more local than it is nationwide, right? So, anyway, um, we will bring you an update from Maryland as it is provided by Kaylee in the coming weeks, no doubt. Now let's go to Georgia. We have two new Senate co-chairs. This from Connor Barker. Little history here. Since its inception, the Georgia Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus has been among the strongest state legislative sportsmen's caucus in the NASC network. The caucus's track record of victories and success has been built on the back of strong caucus leaders coupled with the support of CSF. Bipartisan Bicameral Caucus serves to protect Georgia's sportsmen and women and Georgia's unparalleled hunting and angling opportunities. Recently, Senators Lee Anderson and Sheikh Rahman were selected as new Senate co-chairs for the caucus, joining current House co-chairs Representative Chaz Cannon and Matt Dubnik. The two senators step into these roles following Senator Russ Goodman and his years of dedicated leadership to the caucus. The bipartisan leadership bench will work to advance Georgia's storied outdoor traditions, ensuring that the voices of hunters, anglers, trappers, and rec shooters are well represented at the Georgia General Assembly. In recent years, the caucus has held up their end of the bargain for the Peach State's sportsmen and women, championing numerous sporting conservation policy victories. In 2022, the caucus was instrumental in updating the Georgia's no net loss baseline, which protected an additional 200,000 acres of public land hunting in Georgia. The following year, the caucus protected access to navigable streams of Georgia's sportsmen and women. Finally, just last year, the caucus successfully protected the financial privacy of Georgia's hunters and rec shooters by prohibiting payment car networks from requiring or incentivizing the use of merchant category codes that distinguish firearm retailers from other retailers. With a spirit of uniting sportsmen and conservationists, partners with like minded legislators, the caucus also hosts a variety of events throughout the year to educate policymakers on issues impacting sportsmen and women, as well as to educate caucus members on the importance of the American system of conservation funding. In 2023 alone, Georgia's nearly 1.9 million paid license holders generated a total of $85 million, ranking them 17th nationally in funding received from the sporting license and matching excise tax revenue from both wildlife and sport fish restoration programs. The caucus is hard at work with the regular session well underway in the Peach State. CSF looks forward to working closely with the caucus, our new caucus co-chairs, and our partners to advance Georgia's storied outdoor traditions. Welcome aboard, new co-chairs in Georgia. Good job, Carner, for that report. We appreciate it. This from John Coclaser. CSF supported Disaster Reforestation Act reintroduced. Let's get to the matter. Sustainable forest management creates a quality habitat for wildlife and helps prevent the conversion of forests to other land uses. And the Disaster Reforestation Act offers support for forest landowners after a natural disaster to help them maintain the economic viability of maintaining their lands as forests. As development pressures increase on landowners and insects, disease, fires, and other natural disasters increasingly destroy timber, it is important to provide landowners with financial tools to mitigate their losses. The Disaster Reforestation Act allows landowners to deduct the value of their timber lost from disasters, which is critical for supporting the private working forests throughout the country that sportsmen and women depend on for access. The highlights here: updating the tax code to support forest landowners after a natural disaster is a priority for the forest community to ensure that working forests remain as forests. The legislation requires landowners who utilize the casualty loss deduction to reforest their property within 5 years to prevent the land being converted to non-forest use. Working forests are managed sustainably to provide a renewable supply of wood to a variety of uses while providing habitat for fish and wildlife and places for sportsmen and women to recreate. Recently, CSF and Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus member Representative Buddy Carter and Representative Terry Sewell reintroduced the Disaster Reforestation Act, H.R. 262, which would provide tax relief to private forest landowners for timber loss caused by natural disasters. CSF supports the legislation and joined the forest conservation partners to endorse the bill. And the 118th, the Disaster Reforestation Act, H.R. 655 and Senate 217, had strong bipartisan support, but the bill did not advance either chamber. Specifically, the Disaster Reforestation Act would amend the tax code to allow forest landowners to deduct the fair market value of their uncut timber damaged by firestorm, insects, or other casualties when calculating casualty loss. While there is no federal insurance program for forest landowners like the federal crop insurance program for most agricultural commodities, the legislation would help provide equity for forest landowners by updating the adjusted cost basis limitation on timber casualty loss deductions. CSF appreciates the leadership of Representative Carter and Sewell on this important issue for forest landowners and the sporting community. The Disaster Reforestation Act improvement to the tax code would support keeping working forests as forests, which is crucial for fish and wildlife habitat and access for sportsmen and women. CSF is excited to work with CSC and forest industry partners to support the bill. It's nice to have John, with our rollout of uh, that growth for our policy focus and having John dedicated to forestry and seeing these reports and bringing to light all the work that is done um, in forestry. You always kind of hear it as this aside, this background thing. Um, and we are just so lucky and, it's not luck, but it's we're grateful and happy to be able to have John so focused and dialed in on this stuff. I say it's not luck because it comes from years of hard work and dedication. Certainly, John's background lends, to the ability to be successful in the engagement and building out forestry board and things of that nature. So, being able to tune in every week here and, mostly every week, and then same thing with the TSV EPUB, seeing these articles on forestry and what's actually going on and someone bringing this stuff to light is it's crazy beneficial, and it really, I think, completes the picture, um, in our conservation space and why this all works together. So thank you for your reporting, John. Finally, not that I'm jealous, but you may detect a hint of jealousy. My colleague Marie Newmiller recently, um, had to inconvenience her life by going to Hawaii. Hawaii Legislative Outdoor Heritage Caucus celebrates sportsman heritage. She was on site for this. It's a uh, cool part of the job getting to travel over to Hawaii for her. So let's hear her report. Um, Last week, the Hawaii Legislative Outdoor Heritage Caucus hosted an educational reception to connect caucus members with the sporting conservation community. Caucus co-chairs and representatives from the Department of Land and Natural Resources played key roles in organizing topics of focus for the event. CSF will continue facilitating caucus meetings and events, serving as the bridge between policymakers and the sporting community. In December 2022, Hawaii state legislators officially joined the NASC network, um, through the formation of the Hawaii Legislative Outdoor Heritage Caucus. Uh, it has a mission to protect and advance the right of Hawaii's residents to hunt, fish, and pursue other traditional outdoor activities. The addition of Hawaii to the NAS network brought new questions and ideas into conservation around sports policy. One tough question revolves around managing non native ungulate species and protecting native habitat while working to mitigate fire risk. Recognizing the need to bring many voices to the table to discuss this and other complicated topics, Senator Lynn Ducote and co-chair of Hawaii Legislative Outdoor Heritage Caucus joined with CSF and the DLNR to host an educational reception aimed at connecting legislators with representatives of the sporting community and the agency staff. The event included key informational pieces of the North American model of wildlife management presented by CSF, water and habitat information from the DLRN, and hunter safety information from the sporting conservation community. Recognizing the need to continue these conversations and dig deeper into these sporting and conservation topics, the members of the Hawaii Legislative Outdoor Heritage will be hosting monthly meetings. CSF will work to facilitate these meetings, connecting legislators with the appropriate staff at the agency and sporting community representatives for each topic, serving as the bridge between policymakers and the sporting community. I don't think Maria will be traveling there monthly, although how bad would that just be? I'm kidding. No, obviously, it's important to be on the ground and be with our members, and um, it's interesting to think about Hawaii and the issues they do have with invasives, and um, yeah, I think I've seen it highlighted over the years, um, as it pertains to like axis deer, and you don't think about Hawaii being like a place to go, a destination to go do, kill deer, deer hunt or whatever. But um, I want to say it's the Lanai. Someone will get me on that if I'm wrong, but I think Lanai has this insane population of axis deer, and likely it's open season all the time, and there's just so many deer. I'd love to know the story and how they got there. I don't. Maybe Marie can bring that to us. That'd be an interesting aside to the hunting heritage there in Hawaii. But yeah, man, like some really awesome opportunities there, but so much so that like, it's become detrimental. I think the same thing with the feral pig situation. Uh, on the islands. I mean, certainly they got turkeys. That's pretty cool. I'm not sure they have a season on them. It's not open season, so they can't be causing that much trouble as an invasive, as a non-native species. Um, yeah, I mean, it's opportunities abound, but important conservation issues. And then the fisheries. I mean, holy smokes. The amount of opportunity there for recreational fishing, uh, conservation issues that come up with that, and then even like habitat issues that I don't think we often consider um, anywhere in our country. Maybe some of the Gulf states, extreme southern Florida. When you start thinking of reef protection, these natural habitats that create these great habitats for fishing and subsequent recreational opportunities. Um, Natural reefs, unlike some of the stuff we've covered with Chris Horton, rigs to reef, but there's just these abundant natural underwater habitats that's just insanely amazing and creates these opportunities. So we consider, in the conservation community and in the conservation conversation of Hawaii, that stuff obviously comes to mind. So, uh, they're, 2022, fairly new to NASC, and but we're excited about them, and it's great to see the frequency of meetings being held and the engagement between the conservation community there on the islands and the legislator and people working together to make improvements and create access and opportunity. So, um, be so lot whole lot cooler if it was easier to get to because of some of those opportunities, right? You could probably mitigate some of the abundance of those species, but, um, nevertheless, Marie, we appreciate your sacrifice and traveling west, but, look forward to future reporting, from Hawaii and all the good work that they're doing out there. Alright, friends, uh, thanks for hanging, thanks for tuning in. Um, we will, see you next Wednesday for another news roundup and a new feature episode coming your way. Do go back and check out in the off week here um, podcast offerings, feature offerings. You can catch up on all the news as well. If we look back here, as I mentioned in the top, the Governor Sportsman's Caucus uh, episode dropped last week. And again, you can go check that out. Hear more from Governor Gianforte, Governor Mark Gordon out of Wyoming, and some of the bonus sound we got there from Shot. Also, we had some sound going back to the end of January from Shot again with our friends and partners at Traditions. So, yeah, plenty of stuff to catch up on. Uh, just appreciate you guys hanging. That's it from a very snowy Washington, D.C. here on location. I am covering our changing of the guard post election. We have new co chairs, we have new leadership in the CSC to celebrate. Will definitely be probably some coverage of that in print forthcoming, but we will be covering here on the podcast. Was able to spend some time on the Hill on this trip to bring you some sights, some sounds rather. Um, Hear from Representative or Congressman Westerman, Pfluger, and Senator Bozeman, and Congressman Jimmy Panetta out of the state of California. We'll bring you some sound from the evening's event, the Changing the Guard ceremony dinner. Pretty fantastic event that we get to do. And then it's like I said, another conversation. We're on to Turkey Town. Going to Nashville. We're gonna bring you some sights, sounds, definitely sights and sounds for sure. Um, from Nashville, covering the NWTF convention and sports show. All right, until next week. If you're traveling, be safe. If you're going to Nashville, um, do look me up. Hit us up here. Would love to talk to you, see you, say hi, and reconnect. NWTF convention is a great place to do that. I've often referred to it as the largest family um, gathering that our space has. It's such a fun and awesome time. Family reunion down there in Nashville. And yeah, we'll see you next week for the roundup and the feature episode. Thanks as always for the rates, star fill-ins, the positive reviews. Really keeping us in that forefront of the podcast space and just, having this information be found. It's important, and we thank you for your support. We will see you guys next week. Take care. Bye. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.